PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rachiele, and this is going to be a follow-up video, or as some people are going to call it, a part 2 to the 2017 NHL Expansion Draft video that we did earlier in the week. Now, the reason why we're doing a part 2 is because we had so much information left over from part 1 that, to be honest, we did not have enough time to break down what happened in the expansion draft in part 1. So what we're going to do is make this part 2 of the 2017 NHL expansion draft 7 years later. And what I'm kind of going to focus on is telling you what these players are doing now instead of what they did after they left Vegas and everything going on there. We're just going to focus on what they are doing this current season. So we're going to start this out with just players who are currently playing. So the people who retired, like, for example, Derek England, Clayton Stoner, there are a few players who have retired from this list. We're not going to talk about them. What we're going to be discussing here on this show is we are going to be breaking down the active players who are from this expansion draft and kind of break down what has happened to them since leaving the Vegas Golden Knights and what they've done since the 2017 NHL expansion draft. Now, the first player we're going to mention is Teemu Pukkanen. Now, Teemu Pukkanen, he came from the Arizona Coyotes during that expansion draft. But what I didn't mention, and what I actually should have mentioned, is how he has actually been building a stellar career in the KHL. So for Teemu Pukkanen, a guy who only spent one season with the Golden Knights, he was an AHL player for Chicago, and in 75 games, he had 29 goals for 65 points in his one and only season with the Golden Knights. Then he went over to the KHL, and he played for the Dynamo from 2018 to 2021. And in all 4 of those seasons, he did relatively well for the Dynamo. In fact, he actually had a 17-goal season in 2019-2020. So after spending half a season with the Locomotive, he has spent the past 2 seasons with the Tractor, and they actually had a 22-goal season for Teemu Pukkanen in 2021-2022, 15 goals in the most recent season. Now, Teemu Pukkanen for the 2023-2024 season signed with the Chinese-owned club in the KHL, the Red Star. So I will say, when it comes to Teemu Pukkanen, this is something that I really want to bring up, that he has actually turned his career into a solid KHL level since leaving the Golden Knights organization. So I just wanted to very quickly mention that because I kind of glossed over what happened to Teemu Pukkanen after leaving the Golden Knights in 2017-2018. But yeah, a stellar career in the KHL for a guy like Teemu Pukkanen. Next was actually Colin Miller, and I really wanted to mention him really quickly because of what happened this past offseason when it comes to Colin Miller. So Colin Miller, who we had from the Boston Bruins, he spent a couple of seasons with your Golden Knights, but then, he went over to Buffalo. Then he had a Dallas Stars in his most recent season where he had 6 goals and 21 points in 79 games for the Dallas Stars. He was on that roster that went against Vegas in the Western Conference Finals this past season. Now, on day 1 of the NHL free agency, the Dallas Stars actually flipped Colin Miller to the New Jersey Devils. So the New Jersey Devils have now acquired defenseman Colin Miller. He'll be playing with them for the 2023-2024 season. Now, I will say, if I had to predict, considering all the defensemen that New Jersey has, Colin Miller is going to be a third-line defensive pairing or will be a 7th defenseman for New Jersey. But, Colin Miller has had a relatively solid career after leaving the Golden Knights organization. Like I said, he spent a couple of years in Buffalo, this past season in Dallas, and now will be playing with the New Jersey Devils for 2023-2024. I do want to quickly mention this guy just because I do want to quickly kind of explain what happened to this guy. Because this is actually something that a lot of people don't know, or some people may not be aware. So, from the Carolina Hurricanes, I already broke down the Connor Brickley thing. All right, I already explained that when it came to Connor Brickley, he was somebody that was an AHL level guy. The Golden Knights acquired him, and there really is not much I can talk about with Connor Brickley, considering that he actually retired in 2020 after playing in Austria. Who I'm going to be talking about is Jack Dugan, because Jack Dugan is an interesting case for your Vegas Golden Knights. So Jack Dugan was that 5th round pick that they acquired in 2017 as behalf of that draft pick. Now, after playing only 2 seasons with the Golden Knights organization in 2020 and in 2021, he eventually left the Golden Knights and signed with the New Jersey Devils, and he played in 51 games for the Utica Comets of the AHL, and he had 11 goals and 27 points with the New Jersey Devils. Now, what's fascinating is that he ended up getting dealt around the trade deadline to the Carolina Hurricanes, and now Jack Dugan, it has been reported that he is playing in the ECHL. So for a guy who is part of this equation, he will be playing for the Fort Wayne Comets, who are the ECHL affiliate of the Edmonton Oilers. So for a 5th round pick, I just wanted to quickly mention that he is still active and still playing today just in the ECHL for the Edmonton Oilers, playing for the old affiliate of the Golden Knights in Fort Wayne Comets. And I quickly wanted to mention this guy as well, because it seems like I didn't give this guy enough credit, or didn't give him enough of analysis when we did the 2017 NHL Expansion Draft, and that is Trevor Van Riemsdyk. Now, this guy has done relatively well as a member of the NHL. So after leaving the Vegas Golden Knights and being dealt to the Carolina Hurricanes for a 2nd round pick, he would eventually join the Washington Capitals, where he has been the last couple of seasons. And some good news for TVR, this past offseason, he signed a 3x3 deal. So essentially, he will be with the Washington Capitals organization until 2026. And that is just a really good story by Trevor Van Riemsdyk. Of course, everyone knows he is the younger brother of now Boston Bruin, James Van Riemsdyk in the NHL. But yeah, Trevor Van Riemsdyk's had a really solid career since leaving and since being traded to Carolina. In fact, he had his best season ever this past season, as in 75 games, he had 7 goals and 23 points with the Washington Capitals. So just wanted to very quickly mention that, because he was a good defenseman. A lot of people were cheering for him on expansion draft night, but he eventually became a really solid player for the Washington Capitals. Now, Calvin Pickard is an interesting guy. And the reason why Calvin Pickard is interesting is because not only is he still playing in the NHL today, but Calvin Pickard has actually become a solid member of the Edmonton Oilers. So back in 2022, during the 2022 NHL free agency, he signed a 2-year deal with the Edmonton Oilers. And not only did that 2-year deal give him a chance to be in the AHL, play for the Bakersfield Condors, but he eventually had a chance to also play in the NHL. And considering the goalie situation that the Edmonton Oilers have been having recently, now Jack Campbell, they got him from Toronto. He's been iffy at times. Stuart Skinner has been iffy at times as well, him being a rookie this past season. for Calvin Pickard, for a guy who never played for Vegas. He got sent to the Toronto Maple Leafs the day before opening day rosters were complete. For someone like him, who played in a little under 40 games for the Bakersfield Condors last year and put up some stellar numbers in the ECHL, goals against average of 2.7 and a save percentage around 91%. He has been in the ECHL, he's been in the AHL, he's been in the NHL, former Seattle Thunderbird in the Western Hockey League. So for someone like Calvin Pickard to have been in the AHL/NHL for a decade now is an accomplishment. Anytime you can be a professional hockey player for a solid decade, he has definitely done that. And I really want to say that when it comes to Calvin Pickard, it's very good and really interesting to see how his career has turned out as he has become a solid and a stellar AHL goalie with the Bakersfield Condors of the AHL. And, I'm not going to mention some players because, like I said, they have retired. They're no longer being in it. But someone I do want to mention and someone who really deserves to be talked about is somebody who I feel like doesn't get enough credit for what he is doing right now in the NHL. So this guy right here, Tomas Nosek, the former bottom six forward who the Golden Knights acquired from the Detroit Red Wings. But what some people don't know about Nosek is that after he left the Golden Knights and after he signed a 2-year deal with the Boston Bruins, and the fact, by the way, that he was a bottom six forward when the Boston Bruins set the record for the most wins in a NHL regular season. As a matter of fact, this past season, Tomas Nosek in 66 games had 7 goals and 18 points on the bottom six for your Boston Bruins. So, leaving the Vegas Golden Knights, where he had 18 points as his career high, he goes to the Boston Bruins and sets similar numbers there. Well, Tomas Nosek this past offseason signed a 1-year, $1 million deal with the New Jersey Devils. So, if you actually want to stop and analyze it for a minute, Tomas Nosek and Colin Miller are now playing for the same team. They are now playing for the New Jersey Devils. So kind of interesting how you have two former Vegas Golden Knights members on the New Jersey Devils. So for Tomas Nosek, he is now a bottom six forward for the New Jersey Devils after signing a 1-year deal with them. So really fascinating to me how he has become a solid bottom six forward in the NHL, and the fact that he has played a little under 400 NHL games in the NHL. So really solid job by Nosek, and I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. I know a lot of people don't want to mention that, longevity and, there's a certain amount of games in the NHL. But when you reach 500, 600, 700, 800, for the lucky few that get to 1,000 games in the NHL, it is always a huge accomplishment anytime you see someone hit a certain level in the NHL. So for Nosek, the fact that he is at the 400 game mark as a New Jersey Devil, I have to give him all the props for doing that. Really solid job by him. So then we moved over and we were talking about the Edmonton Oilers really quickly because this guy is still kind of playing around. This guy is someone who I actually am surprised is still playing around, but he is at the present moment. And that person that we are talking about, of course, is Alexei Emelin. This is someone who, by the way, a lot of people forget to mention that he went over to the KHL after leaving the Vegas Golden Knights organization. After being traded to the Nashville Predators, he ended up going to the KHL. That is him right there, Alexei Emelin. And this guy was a solid bruiser, a good defenseman for the Montreal Canadiens. He eventually leaves and goes to Nashville. But what happened to Emelin is really interesting because when it comes to him, he went to the KHL after spending one season in Nashville, where he had 1 goal and 9 points in 76 games. Then he went to the Omsk, where he played 4 seasons with them. And his best season actually was 2020-2021, where in 59 games, he had 6 goals and 21 points. And then he spent 1 season with Minsk, where in 38 games, he had 9 points. And then he was with Moscow for half a season. He had 3 points in 6 games. So for Alexei Emelin, it's really fascinating to see how his career has gone after leaving the NHL. So similar to what I mentioned earlier about Teemu Pukkanen, Alexei Emelin has actually kind of become a solid player in the KHL. He's kind of become an everyday guy in the KHL. And then I have to mention these two because if I did not mention them, I feel like some people would definitely call me out for it, and justly so, if I did not mention them at all. So, if we're going to do this right, and we're going to talk about these guys. So, when it comes to these guys right here, Erik Haula. Now, Erik Haula was with the Golden Knights for a couple of seasons. But most people who do know about the Erik Haula situation, he left Vegas, got traded to the Carolina Hurricanes, and then after being bounced around for a couple of teams, he has now been ending up with the New Jersey Devils. And then, so the New Jersey Devils have Erik Haula, Colin Miller, and Tomas Nosek as members of the New Jersey Devils. So kind of an insane thing to think about. That when it comes to the Vegas Golden Knights, you have multiple players who are on the New Jersey Devils squad out there from Vegas. So the New Jersey Devils this past season for Erik Haula, he had 80 games, 14 goals, and 41 points. So even at a couple of years removed from playing in Vegas, he is still at a 40-point pace. And for a middle six forward, don't be shocked if he does something similar to that with New Jersey this season. I wouldn't be surprised if he hits double digits in goals for New Jersey. And for Erik Haula, once again, he has played a little over 600 NHL games in his career. So for a guy like Erik Haula, it's been really fascinating, to me anyway, to see how he has become and how he has done as a member of the New Jersey Devils. But just really crazy to me how 7 years later, after this NHL expansion draft, Colin Miller, Tomas Nosek, and Erik Haula are all playing in New Jersey after being with Vegas during the 2017 NHL expansion draft. And then you see Alex Tuch right there as well. And I can't forget about Alex Tuch because of what he is doing with the Buffalo Sabres. Not only has Alex Tuch become one of the best players in Buffalo, but I do also have to quickly mention that when it comes to Alex Tuch, he signed that deal with the Golden Knights in a certain offseason to stay there after he signed a 7-year deal around $33 million. But Alex Tuch, in his 2 seasons in being in Buffalo, he has had 48 goals as a member of the Buffalo Sabres. So it's really crazy to see how the Buffalo Sabres acquired a guy in Alex Tuch who has scored 48 goals in just 2 seasons with the Buffalo Sabres. And if anyone wants to talk about points, by the way, in his most recent season with the Buffalo Sabres, in 74 games, he had 79 points as a member of the Buffalo Sabres. And I have no doubt in my mind that if you're going to predict what he will do by the end of this season, he will probably be just a little under a point per game. So I wouldn't be shocked if he is at the 60 or 70 point mark, considering that he does miss some games due to injury we have seen in the past, especially 2019, 2020, when he played in 42 games. Then he had the 2021, 2022 season where he only played in 50 games. So for Alex Tuch, I will say that he will be someone in Buffalo who will be a top 6 forward. But for anyone who's complaining about losing Alex Tuck, the Vegas Golden Knights won that deal by getting a top 10 player in Jack Eichel. So, really fascinating to really talk about what happened to Alex Tuck, Eric Holla, stuff like that. But a player who doesn't get mentioned enough, and I want to mention this guy just because he doesn't get enough credit for what he has done since leaving the Golden Knights, and that is former New Jersey Devil defenseman John Merle. And John Merle is someone who's done very well after leaving the Golden Knights organization, and he is currently with the Minnesota Wild as one of their defensemen in the NHL. And what I can respect about John Merle is that, he left the New Jersey Devils, he comes over to Vegas, he plays a couple of seasons here, then he goes to the Detroit Red Wings in free agency. He only played one season with them before going to the Minnesota Wild the past couple of years. This past season, he had 12 points in Minnesota as their third pairing defenseman. And that's really what he has become in the NHL. So for John Merrill, at this point in his career, he is over 500 NHL games with the Minnesota Wild. But what I can respect about him is the fact that he, after leaving Vegas, has become a constant in Minnesota. That's something you don't see a lot of in the NHL. So for a guy like John Merle, I really respect, and I actually like the fact that this guy ended up becoming a solid third defensive pairing in Montreal and doing something that I actually have to give a lot of credit for. He left Vegas and he has become a constant there. Now, somebody that doesn't get talked about enough, but I will mention him very quickly, is Oscar Lindberg. Now, Oscar Lindberg, the Golden Knights got him from the New York Rangers, and after being with Vegas for 2 seasons, he would be dealt to the Ottawa Senators in the Mark Stone deal. But what some people don't know about Oscar Lindberg is that after leaving the NHL, he would play in the Swiss A, he'd play in the KHL, and currently is playing for the AIK in the Swedish Hockey League. And Oscar Lindberg is signing a deal with them. He played for the Swiss A this past season, and in 51 games, he had 16 goals and 42 points while playing for the Bern SC in the Swiss A. So, for someone like Oscar Lindberg, I ought to say once again, he's playing professional hockey. Now, regardless if he is in the KHL, playing for the Dynamo that you see up there, playing for the Bern SC in the Swiss A, or even if you're playing in Sweden, regardless of where you are playing, you have to acknowledge that when it comes to Oscar Lindberg, he is still playing professional hockey. He's still doing it for a living. He is just doing it in Sweden now instead of in the NHL. But I just wanted to quickly mention him because it's something fascinating to talk about. And then this last person that I'm kind of going to talk about in length is someone who has actually made a career off of being a fourth line guy. But he does it very well. And of course, that is a fan favorite who the Golden Knights got from the Philadelphia Flyers in Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. And when it comes to Bellemare, him being taken by the Golden Knights, there wasn't that much expectations for him. I mean, he was already in his 30s. He was a kind of an aging guy by the time he got to Vegas after playing for the Philadelphia Flyers the last couple of seasons prior. But he did solid in his 2 seasons in Vegas. Then he would go and play for the Colorado Avalanche and would actually help them get the President's Trophy while in Colorado. But he would then join the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, he would play with them for the last 2 seasons. But interesting enough, when it comes to him, and I actually found this to be a bit interesting, in the 2022 Stanley Cup Finals, Pierre-Edouard Bellemare would be playing for the Tampa Bay Lightning, and he would lose in the Stanley Cup Finals to a team that he had just left prior, the Colorado Avalanche. So he left Vegas to go to Colorado and they didn't win the championship. Then he goes to Tampa Bay, and he doesn't win a championship there, and actually loses to in the 2022 Stanley Cup Finals, the team that he had just left. And then the season afterwards, this past season, Tampa Bay lost to Toronto in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Now, some good news for Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. He actually signed a free agent deal with the Seattle Kraken. So once again, for about the 7th or 8th season now in a row, he has established himself as a solid fourth-line center. He is someone in Pierre-Edouard Bellemare that if you have him as a winger and he's somebody that could be a fourth-line type of player, that is what you're going to get from him. And his statistics, by the way, in his career, he has played, and check this out, he has played over 600 NHL games in his career. So for a fourth-line player who was loved in Vegas, was probably loved in Philly and Colorado and Tampa Bay, Seattle's probably going to like him as well. For someone like Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, for someone who is playing over 600 NHL games, he has definitely been a success as well. And then the last player I have to mention, and this is only because I felt like I kind of overlooked him in the last one, and I will apologize for that. David Perron, out there at the St. Louis Blues. Now, the reason why I kind of overlooked him in the original is because a lot of people already know about David Perron. In fact, he was kind of one of the biggest names the Golden Knights got during the expansion draft. But what happened with David Perron is really interesting because he would sign a 4x4 deal to leave the Golden Knights and go to St. Louis on a 4-year contract. And not only did David Perron end up having a very successful 4-year tender in St. Louis, but David Perron would end up winning a Stanley Cup as a top 6 forward in St. Louis, and would actually have 7 goals and 16 points during that year he helped St. Louis win the Cup. Now, for David Perron, in his 4 years in St. Louis, he had over 20 goals 3 out of the 4 years. He had over 40 points in all 4 years he was there. In fact, he had an incredible 60-point season in 2019-2020. But David Perron would eventually move on from St. Louis, and he would join the team that you're going to see right here, as he would sign a contract with the Detroit Red Wings on a 2-year deal. And for David Perron this past season, he played every single game, had once again a 20-point season, and had over 55 points as a top 6 forward in Detroit. So for David Perron, he has made a fantastic career as a member of the Vegas Golden Knights, the St. Louis Blues, and then eventually the Detroit Red Wings. And I also have to say congratulations, because it happened kind of a while ago. David Perron actually broke the 1,000 games played in the NHL. So for a one-time All-Star and for a one-time Stanley Cup champion to play over 1,000 games in the NHL, I have to say congratulations to David Perron for doing that. So that's kind of what I wanted to do with this NHL expansion draft. Just kind of do a follow-up and kind of show certain players and certain things that happened during this expansion draft that I was not able to do in the first video. So if you like this video, share it to all your friends around the world, and subscribe to the PR Connections YouTube channel. We also have a YouTube channel on here, Vegas Hockey Hub, where we try to post content every single day. And we also have our social media accounts as well. We are on all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. We are everywhere at Vegas Hockey Hub. And if you want to follow your host, I am at Ian J. Rachiele on all social media platforms as well. So until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rachiele. Continue watching hockey. Go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.